you, Professor Krishna, and welcome.
Thank you, Tapashri. I am thankful to Erika for inviting me to speak to you on this topic today. What I'm going to say is mostly what I have learned from Krishnamurti as my teacher. But what I say is not attributable to him, because I say what I understand from his teaching. Every human being has two components to his consciousness. One, which may be called universal, with which we are born. It includes the body, the senses, it includes the instincts, and everything that we have received as a gift from nature in the course of biological evolution. All that is part of nature's order. It's not created by human beings. And therefore, in a sense, it is a manifestation of the divine, or you could say it is sacred, as nature is sacred. Every human being is born with this. And that's why we are very similar to each other. We all have capacity for awareness, for memory, for language, for thinking, for imagination. The body functions exactly the same. So the differentiation comes later on, after birth. There may be some genetic differentiation, which because not everyone is identical, but everyone stands on the same ground. What differences come afterwards are usually the product of our birth, which is an accident of birth, because you don't know where you will be born. Depending on where you are born, which country, which family, you acquire a certain religion, certain moral values, you acquire a certain environment, and the child grows up in imitation of its environment. That conditions its mind like a computer that is programmed. So if I might carry that analogy further, I would say that human beings are like identical IBM computers, but programmed somewhat differently. You can have one computer programmed as a Muslim and another programmed as a Hindu or a Christian or a communist and so on. And when you are attached to that program, because you have grown up with it, you identify with it, you start feeling separate from others, which is the movement of creating the self with the small s. Awareness is the self with the capital S, which is common to all of us. It doesn't have a structure. It's just your ability to see, to perceive, and intelligence is there. It may vary from individual to individual. It may manifest in different ways in different individuals. But every human being has intelligence. Every human being has memory. Every human being learns to speak language. And there is a lot that is common in our emotions and, of course, in our body. That's what I understand to mean that the other man is yourself, which is what the Buddha taught as the truth. And common in our that the differences Am I audible?
Yes.
Yes. The differences come because we identify either with our nation or with our religion or with a particular caste in India or an ideology like communist ideology or Marxist ideology or scientific ideology. And therefore you get typed and you belong to a certain group. These groups do seem to provide a certain sense of security because when you belong to a group, you feel that they will help you. They are your fellow brothers community. You belong to that community. But if you look a little further, you will also see that these same groups have been the cause of great division, hatred, and eventually wars. I'm told that there have been more wars in the name of religion than there have been even over property or territory, which means it becomes a travesty of anything that is called religious, because religion, most of that word is to bind together, not to divide. And the Theosophical Society talks about the universal brotherhood of man. This has been talked about even before the formation of the Theosophical Society in Buddhism and Hinduism and so on. But it has not become a reality. So we must examine why it has not become a reality. And unless we rid our mind of the causes of the division, it will never become a reality. And the cause of that division is psychological. It's not biological. If you could look at differences only as differences, they don't create division. We have not had a war between tall people and short people. Those short people are different from tall people because we understand that difference. We are different in our food habits, in our knowledge, in our language in which we speak, but these have not become sources of division. But skin color, strangely, blacks and whites, when you combine that with some kind of measurement which says blacks are inferior to whites, you become a racist. It's a fact that the man from Africa is black and the man from Europe is pink or white. How does that fact turn into a division? When you attach a value judgment to it, it creates division because you create a sense of condemnation in it. The same thing between the religious groups. If you just notice that a Muslim prays in a mosque and the Hindu prays in a temple because that's what they have been taught in their environment, and they are both worshipping a certain entity called God in their own way, it's just a difference of manner. But when you say, my way of doing it is superior to other ways of doing it, you turn that into division and you form groups around that division. So there is a whole psychological process behind this group formation. Similarly with ideological groups, when you identify yourself as a communist, you think you belong to communism, and then you have separation from capitalists, and you have war situations between capitalists and communists. All that endangers security. So the feeling that you get security by belonging to a group or a community is narrow-minded. If you saw with a far vision, which is what wisdom means, then it doesn't lead to security, it really creates insecurity. But when you are not aware of it, it creates what is called illusion. Illusion means you think something is true when it is not true. Or you're giving tremendous importance to something when it's not really important. And the Buddha taught that ignorance as illusion is the cause of all sorrow. Ignorance not as lack of knowledge, but as illusion. Illusion means it's not a fact of nature. It is something created by the human mind, and you have given importance to it and you have taken it to be true when it is not true. So our conditioning contains both what is factual, what is useful, like language or mathematics and so on. And it also contains these illusions which are created by thought. Somebody created casteism in India maybe 3,000 years ago, and it still perpetuates. And it divides people into 4 different groups. They are all identical. They are born in the same culture, in the same place, but they don't intermarry, they remain separate. They look down on each other, and that creates a division. The division is a creation of illusion. So it's our illusions that divide us. And because it is illusions that divide us, they can be ended, because illusion can be ended through the quest for truth. The quest for truth is what is called self-knowledge. Because truth is not an idea or a concept. You cannot learn that just from a book. You have to perceive that for yourself. It is that direct perception which acts on the consciousness. And that direct perception is not part of your knowledge. What is in your memory, what is in your knowledge, is your conditioning. So thought which is born out of memory is a colored instrument. It is colored by your particular conditioning, which depends on where you were born and brought up. And if you identify with it, it creates the ego. The ego means I separate myself and I create a group called the me and the mind. That may be a family group, it may be a national group, it may be a linguistic group, or it may be an ideological group. But it's a division in the world, because you are not a citizen of the world then. You are belonging to that particular community, and you treat other communities as rivals, as competitors, and that creates the division. The mind then becomes like a personal lawyer, defending the me and the mind, justifying and looking for profits and security for the me and the mind. That's the ego state. And that's why the religious quest is for freedom from this ego state, which is freedom from identification with this condition. Madame Blavatsky wrote long ago, at the time of when she wrote the key to Theosophy and the starting of Theosophical Society and so on. She said, you must completely extinguish the personality before you join the esoteric section and practice occultism. Otherwise, it will burn you. You can read it. It is there in the Key to Theosophy. She was aware of this fact. Now, how do we burn the personality, end the personality? You can't end your memory. It contains all the factual things also. It will lead to amnesia. So the conditioning is held in memory, and there is no way we can erase it. But surely we can examine it. We don't have to be a slave to that conditioning. As I said, it's an accident of birth. Some of the things may be healthy and useful and create no division, no disorder in consciousness, as jealousy or anger or hatred or violence and so on. Then they are innocent things. It's all right, they're useful. We may retain them. But there are others where you identify and you create division. And from that division, there is conflict. And then that conflict takes various forms. It may begin small, but it may end up in a huge war. Indeed, our history is a history of wars. For 3,000 years, as far as we know history, human beings have always been at war with other human beings. Why have we not learned? And how many more wars before we learn not to make war? That war doesn't solve any problems, that it impoverishes all of us. It's so easy to see that. And yet the mind is not free from that. Because it's not enough to logically accept that yes, war is a bad thing and we must eliminate it. It's not enough to have that opinion, just as it's not enough to have the opinion that all human beings are brothers. That is not brotherhood. Unless we eliminate the division from our mind, which means eliminate hatred from our mind, eliminate this identification with a particular group in our mind, we are not really brothers. And merely positing it as an ideal and trying to practice it creates hypocrisy. It doesn't create brotherhood. You pretend to be brothers when you are not really brotherly. So it becomes a travesty of truth. So that's the wrong way to go about it. The right way is to discern what is true and what is false in one's conditioning and end the false. It can be ended because the false is illusory. It's a creation of, it's just a thought construct. It's not a fact of nature. But if you don't doubt it, the problem is that the mind that is in illusion is not aware that it is in illusion. Only rarely. You might tell a fairy tale to your child and you might know that it's an illusion. It's just being done for entertainment. You don't take that to be a fact, then it doesn't create division. But when you take that to be true, when it is not true, it's just something imaginary, then it creates disorder in consciousness in the form of all the negative emotions. So that was the teaching of the Buddha, and that is the cause of the division between human beings. And that's why it can be eliminated. Now, this self-knowledge is very different from the knowledge that we receive in school and college and university. That's additive. You are adding to the memory. Whereas self-knowledge is subtracting from the memory that which is false. It's really an unlearning process, unlearning the false in your own mind. So let's examine a little deeper. What is the nature of these illusions? They lie at different levels of our consciousness. At the most superficial level, they are what we call superstitions. They vary from culture to culture. but they create a lot of fear, which is just due to a false notion. In India, for instance, there are many people who believe that if a cat crosses your path, it's a bad omen. And I've seen even professors turn back their car and take a different route when the cat crosses the path. Because right from childhood, that's what he has believed and he has been told. And it functions in his psyche and creates fear. There are more sinister superstitions, but superstitions can be got rid of even with scientific inquiry or intellectual inquiry. They are fairly superficial part of illusions. Deeper than that are the cultural illusions, the gender differentiation, the notions that women can do this, cannot do this, and so on. Those are all man-made ideas. And if you call it culture, you don't see the cruelty in it. So you might not allow a woman to work or to go out of the house because you say this is our culture. Our women don't go out and work outside. They remain inside the house. You don't realize that this is just a morality you are creating out of your thinking. And it's really cruel. It's preventing a human being from normal, natural freedom. So for thousands of years, women have been held down. Only now they are beginning to at least conceptually accept that women are the same as men and should have the same freedoms as men have. There are many parts of the world which still don't function that way. And even with those which claim to function that way don't completely function that way because the mind is still with the past. So we are to a large extent the products of the past. And that past becomes our conditioning, the prison of our conditioning. And out of that comes a lot of discrimination and cruelty and division and hatred, which is given names like nationalism, patriotism, my culture, our moral values, and so on. And so you don't see the cruelty. Therefore, it's a different kind of learning. It's a learning that begins with doubt, which says, I don't really know the truth. My mind doesn't tell me the truth. It tells me what is I have received as a conditioning right from childhood, and that may not be true. So I have to find out whether it is true or not. So you posit the truth as the unknown. Now, such a mind is a learning mind. The learning mind says, I don't know what the truth is, but I will discover. I will find out what the truth is. It doubts what its own mind says, because there is nothing special about our own opinions. Our own opinions are not necessarily more true than our friend's opinion or the opinion of people on the other side of the globe. They are just conditioned differently from you. And no conditioning is the truth. So this is a very different kind of learning, and thought cannot be used for this learning because thought itself is a colored instrument. Let me give a couple of gross examples of that. The Hindu looks at a cow and sees a goddess there. And the American looks at the same cow and sees beef. And no wonder they dislike each other, fight with each other. It's a big issue today in India. Some people eat beef and others object to that because they say that this is contrary. This is, you're defiling our goddess and so on. So all kinds of peculiar things result from these illusions. But they sit deeply inside us. If you look at the greatest and wisest human beings, like the Buddha or Jesus Christ, or perhaps Krishnamurti and Ramana Maharshi in our times and so on, you will find that they are people who walked out of their past. They are people who dissented from the past. Buddha dissented from Hinduism. There was casteism, there was animal sacrifice, there was worship in Hinduism. He dissented from all that, brought something new. Jesus Christ dissented from the Jews, brought something new. He said, don't retaliate, don't return violence with violence. The Jewish belief was not that. So the greatest human beings have been those who have been able to see through their conditioning and go beyond it. That's a creative process. And creative process, you cannot think it out. Creative perception is like an insight. An insight, both in science and in art or in music, is beyond the known. Just the practice of the known is different. There is a beautiful book called The Structure of Scientific Revolutions by Thomas Kuhn. That was his PhD thesis at MIT. He shows there that the great revolutions of science have not come through logical stepwise process. They have come from deep insights which went beyond the conditioning from the past, the knowledge of the past. Einstein, who is considered one of the greatest scientists of the 20th century, probably all times, says intuition is a sacred gift and reason is a faithful servant. We have created a society which honors the servant and has forgotten the gift. He realized that without intuition, no revolution is possible. You can add 2 plus 2 and make 4. That's not creativity. Creativity is not the product of adding 2 known things. That's invention. Creativity is the human being's capacity to make a foray into the unknown and pick up something that was not in the known and bring it into the known. All great discoveries in all fields of endeavor have happened like that. And they have changed, brought about great change in human beings. But unfortunately, our education has neglected this capacity. It has cultivated the capacity of thought and memory and knowledge and techniques because it values everything in terms of productivity. Productivity, economic productivity. What will you contribute? They reward the person who's slightly better at some job than other people. All that is also part of conditioning. Our idea of success is simply derived from society. We haven't questioned it. Our idea of competition as necessary, not seeing that it is creating division, rivalry, destroying brotherhood. So these illusions affect the educated just as much as they affect the uneducated. We are aware of the illusion of the terrorist, but we are not aware of our own illusion. And the terrorist is not aware of his own illusion either. That's the difficulty of this quest for truth. But the Theosophists said, there is no religion higher than truth. And this quest for truth is therefore the essence of Theosophy. That truth is not part of the known, it's the unknown. And the only way to get to the known is to doubt the known, to question it, not interminably. You have to keep the questioning and the skepticism also on a leash, but you will soon find out what it is. So Krishnamurti suggested a different way of learning. He said, whenever you experience a disorder in your consciousness, it's arising from some illusion in your mind, which is a creation. You are approaching life wrongly. Find out what that is and get rid of it. That is the question. So jealousy, anger, hatred, all become opportunities to learn about oneself. We don't treat them that way. We treat them as a nuisance. We treat them as something to be suppressed, as vice. We have not used them as opportunities for learning about oneself. But the Buddha said, you have to learn about yourself, which is what self-knowledge is. And it doesn't come from identification. Identification will produce groupism and division. And unless the individual transforms by freeing his mind of these illusions, you will never have brotherhood, you will never have real love. What we call love is mostly desire, sexual desire, attachment, possessiveness. That's not real love. Love is where the self-centered motive is not. And how do you get rid of the self-centered motive when you are attached to your own conditioning and your own group? We seek security in that group, which also means that you have a dependence on that group. And when you have dependence on that group, you're attached to it. And where you are attached, you have fear of losing that attachment. And that also manifests as jealousy. In case somebody else snatches off your attachment. So all the psychological disorder in consciousness arises from such illusions. And unless you eliminate that from your consciousness, you can't have a mind that has peace and love and compassion and so on. You can keep worshipping and idealizing about it, but it will never become a reality. So he taught that the transformation of consciousness is the very purpose of the religious quest. And that's only possible through this quest for what is true and what is false. And for that, you need this learning mind, which doesn't use thought, but uses awareness. It is watching. And every time it notices a disorder in consciousness, it wants to find out what is the origin of it and eliminate the illusion from which it arises. That's the work that we have all to do as theosophy. That's why it's called regeneration, because it's not a continuation of what you are. It's a discontinuous process. We have greatly valued knowledge, but knowledge, even of the scriptures and so on, does not bring wisdom. If it's dead, all professors should be wise. Professors of philosophy and so on should be wise people, not an observed fact. Nor does experience bring wisdom. Otherwise, all old people are very experienced, they should be wise. Not true. So these notions are also false, that knowledge will bring wisdom, that experience will bring wisdom. It does not. This inquiry into what is true, what is false, and what is true, which is not just an intellectual inquiry, but an existential inquiry, using all your senses and your awareness with a question and exploring that question, that alone is capable of ending the illusions in our mind. And as I said, it is these illusions that produce the disorder. There is no disorder anywhere in nature. There's tremendous order. There is no ego anywhere in nature, neither among plants, nor animals, nor in the universe, nor rocks, nor rivers. It's there only in human consciousness. It's not there in our body. Our body functions with great order of nature, tremendous order. Why is the consciousness not in order? It's a creation of this capacity of a human being for imagination and for creating illusion. Of course, imagination is also useful too. You wouldn't have developed surgery and all the poetry and art and so on if you didn't have imagination. So one is not against imagination, one is not against thought. But one has to learn what is the right use of these faculties and what is the wrong use of these faculties. That's why Krishnamurti talked about the art of living. The art of living is neither to say knowledge is useless, nor to say knowledge is everything, it will give me everything, but to find the right place of knowledge and the right place of imagination and the right place of intellect and intelligence and awareness and observation and the right place of inquiry and doubt in one's living. That's the only way to free oneself from this prison of conditioning. But unfortunately, we feel quite comfortable in our conditioning. And only we begin to question it only when great sorrow comes, some war comes, your child dies, and so on. Then you begin to question, why did this happen to me? So you have to give up this idea that inquiry is necessary only when there is some sorrow or some pain. Inquiry is necessary all the time. The ego is like the root of a tree. One branch is fear, another branch is desire, third branch is violence, fourth branch is hatred, and so on. And one of those branches manifests in our consciousness at one time. And we are satisfied with dealing with that branch till we become comfortable. But that branch is also connected to the root. And if your inquiry doesn't end into comfort, you have the opportunity to go all the way and uproot the whole tree. And that's what it means, freedom from the ego or realization and so on, which is the aim of transformation and of the religious quest. So I'll end it here, and maybe we can have some questions and answers depending on the time available.
Thank you very much, Professor Krishna, for such an inspirational lecture. I will open for questions now.
Yes.
We will have only 3 questions because it's quite late in India. And there is a question from Portugal, which from Francisco Gonçalves. He is asking, is there any conscious in death, meditation, sleep state or dream state? Or we are conscious only in watchfulness? Where is the limit between conscious and unconscious?
When conscious meditation means you are consciously undertaking something you are doing in order to achieve an end which you seek. That's the essence of the ego process, isn't it? whether that is monetary profit, or it is spiritual profit, or it is social profit, or it is security. You are seeking something which you don't have. And that kind of approach is the self-centered approach. So it will not take you beyond the self. You may be able to experience some states which may be very pleasant or ecstatic and so on. But that's not freedom. So conscious meditation is not real meditation. This quest for truth, what is true and what is false, which is self-knowledge, is part of meditation. Because it needs to be done with awareness, not through thought. And it needs to be done just to understand, not in order to achieve a result for yourself. So one has to question this whole approach of wanting to do something in order to achieve an end. That itself is a self-centered or ego process, and it sustains the ego. Even though the end may be noble, it's not the problem is not whether the end is noble or ignoble, but whether you are approaching it egoistically or non-egoistically. Everything can be done egoistically and everything can be done non-egoistically. Depends on your motive with which you are doing it. So if you are doing the meditation as part of your learning process, because you are interested in self-knowledge and you want to discover what that meditation does, you can do various things. You can fast, you can go without food, you can give up certain pleasure and see what are the consequences of it. So you do various experiments in order to learn about your own dependence on various things. All that is part of self-knowledge, the learning of self-knowledge. But when you do it with a motive to achieve an end, it turns egoistic. And the ego is a greater problem than everything else, because that can be examined, that it is the ego that is the entire tree. And the root of the tree is the ego. And so if you still are with the ego, it's no use saying this branch is very good.
Thank you, Professor.
You're welcome.
Thank you. Please, Ifigenia, you have a question, you have the words.
Thank you, Erika. Professor Krishna, it's Ifi again. Thank you very much for this great talk and a very analytical presentation of Krishnamurti's teaching. My question is, we are all born and raised within a society of conditioned minds. They are all trying to pass on their values and their knowledge onto us. So we end up, as you very well pointed out, with a conditioned mind and a very strong memory, which is our life. Now, we know that it's not, I suppose you agree to that it is not possible to delete our memory and acquire a fresh mind, as Krishnamurti said, all fresh again. Do you think that according to Krishnamurti's teaching and message, what we actually should do on our quest for truth and knowledge, the right knowledge, we should rise above our personality?
Yes, what you're saying is true, that it becomes increasingly difficult in adult life to free oneself from the conditioning, because the conditioning repeatedly strengthens itself. That's why it has to begin early, and Krishnamurti tried to change education. He said education must not cultivate competition, it must not promote reward and punishment, It must allow creativity. It must promote sensitivity. You must create the educational space, must create, help develop love and compassion and non-violence in the child by creating an environment like that, and so on. Right now, the child grows up in an environment where he sees religious division, he sees caste division, he sees all this war and so on, and his mind gets infected by society. So what's going on outside becomes the inside, the individual. And that inside maintains the outside. So this is a vicious circle, and it can only be broken when you question it, when you doubt it. And also it needs a fair amount of sensitivity and doubt. And unfortunately, our education is not cultivating that. It is cultivating knowledge and promoting ambition, because they are very much minded over what job you will do and how much money you will earn in life. They are not interested whether you will be a selfish individual or you will be a man with love. They don't care. They want the job done. So we are looking upon our children as raw material to be fashioned and used to perform jobs in society. We don't care for them. We don't love our children. If we did, we wouldn't bring them up that way, to fight in war and get killed, to form groups and fight and so on. You don't care for them. So he wanted to change education. He said you have to start with sensitivity right from age 3. Develop things and bring up the child with nature, with a feeling for birds, animals, trees, rivers, mountains, nature. We are part of nature. But to emphasize only the capacity that will enable you to earn money is a wrong way. You are promoting the ego in the child. So that is a problem. And I agree with you that it becomes extremely difficult in old age, or even after 20, 25 years of age. The conditioning becomes very strong, and it becomes far more difficult to get rid of it. But
Thank you very much,
nevertheless,
Professor.
that is the only way you can free yourself of this division.
Thank you, Professor Krishna.
You're welcome.
There is one more question, and it's the last one. It's from Janet Lee. Janet Lee, could you please use your mic and comment?
Thank you. That was a wonderful talk. I'm afraid I missed the very beginning because I misread the time. But I was very interested in what you were saying about conflict. And my question is, sometimes it's necessary to stand up against unacceptable behavior. For example, standing up against genocide. However, sometimes others don't like this and condemn this standing up. And I'm wondering if you can comment, please. Can you say, how do we stand up to unacceptable behavior without making conflict?
Yes, it depends on whether you are concerned about the immediate solution to the problem or the long-term solution to the problem. The immediate solution is being tried all the time. The government has the police force and the courts, and they catch hold of people and put them in prisons and so on. But has that ended crime? It will never end, no? Because you are not removing the cause of it, the crime. A child is born in your society. Why does he turn into a murderer or a rapist? Who is responsible? Is the society responsible for that? When Krishnamurti was giving a talk in 1948, it was a time when Gandhi was shot, 30th January 1948. So somebody asked him, "Sir, who was responsible for the murder of Gandhi?" And Krishnaji said, Each one of you who is divided from his fellow man on the basis of religion, on the basis of caste, on the basis of language, nationality, is responsible for that murder. It was a very strange answer. Are we all responsible? That's what he's saying. Is that true? Let's examine that a little deeper. What created that man? Godse was the murderer who was caught and then hanged because the law found him guilty of the murder. He was born in this country, no? He grew up in this environment. How did he become a murderer? He was not born a murderer. He was infected with this Hindu-Muslim division in the country because society has it. The child gets infected with this. And he acquires that kind of opinions, and he hates people who are supporting Muslims. And he thought Gandhi was supporting Muslims, so he shot him. He was a Hindu, but he shot Gandhi because he felt Gandhi was supporting Muslims. I'm not going into whether it was true or not. I'm going into the fact. What made God say that way? We have created this society in which there is casteism. So all of us are responsible for that. No? Who creates the terrorist? What creates war? All of us are responsible. No? Our patriotism, our feeling of punishing the other man, and so on, all that is responsible. So in the long run, unless we as individuals are peaceful, brotherly, affectionate, kind, the world will be what we are. If we are hateful, we are angry, the world has that. Violence, anger, division. It's a consequence like chemistry. If you have these human beings in India, you have human beings infected with casteism. There is casteism in society, caste discrimination, caste division, caste riots, all that. You don't have that in Europe. You have your own version of cruelty. So unless the individual transforms in the long run, which is the job of education. So education must concern itself with the transformation of consciousness of man and not trying to raise human beings to just adjust to society and conform to society, but to question society. If you don't do that, you don't eliminate the disease. You only eliminate one symptom. Godse is one symptom of that kind of society. And there will be more Godses that have arisen after he has gone. There are others. There are even people who worship him. So the division continues, and the causes for rape and the causes for crime, they continue. In the same way, the cause for war, what has been our response to war? We have created a United Nations. It goes there the moment a war is about to start, some guns start shooting and so on. They send a committee, they try to make peace there and so on, and they reach some sort of agreement. That's just treating the symptom. Where does the war begin? Does war begin only when guns shoot and planes bomb places and so on? That's our idea of war. That's our conditioning. But isn't there psychological warfare before that between the two communities? And isn't the physical warfare the result of that psychological warfare? So what have you done about the psychological warfare? Nothing. 3,000 years and we still have that psychological warfare. We will continue to have wars. No? And it's an observed fact. We are merely accepting that human beings are like this and they can't change. Well, if they can't change, then you continue to live in hell. Aldous Huxley made an interesting statement. Looking to all that is going on in all over the world in our society, He said, maybe this world is the hell of another. We think hell and heaven are after death, but maybe we are already in hell, the kind of things that are going on all around. But we ourselves are responsible for the state of our society in that deep sense. Of course, there is the immediate. Of course, if a man is a rapist, to protect the woman is equally important, and the law enforcement has to catch hold of him. But just catching hold of him and putting him in prison will not end this. You will have to educate the child to be free from all this. Without that, you are not curing the disease, you are only suppressing the symptom. So, long-term solution and immediate solution, they are two different things.
Thank you very much, Professor Krishna.
You're welcome.
It's very late in India. I know that some of you wish to ask questions, but unfortunately we cannot go on. We must close our today's session now. Thank you very much, Professor Krishna, again for your
Thank you
time
for inviting me.
and for your inspirational lecture. And we hope that next year you can join us in Edinburgh, Scotland. Hopefully the situation with COVID will be under control and things will be better.
I wish that too. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Taps will now do some announcements before closing our today's session.
Thank you. That was a very inspiring talk. Thank you. Before we close, I have two announcements to make. One, we have a lecture tomorrow by Dr. Rupert Sheldrake. The link, Erica will send the link later today or tomorrow before the meeting. And we have a lecture by Edward Abdel on Wednesday as well. So it's a very, very busy week for the school. So see you all later. Have a great Sunday and thank you.
Thank you. I wish you all a very nice week.
Thank you.
Professor Krishna. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all. Juliet, don't go, please.
Do you want me to?
Yeah, you can stay too also.
You want me? Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh.
Of course, I'm sorry. I know you and
That's all right.
Lilian wish to ask a question, but Professor Krishna asked for it's more than 10 p.m. in India, so it's too late for them.
Yes,